Hello, Giant fans, and welcome on in to New York Giants on SI's weekly preview. The New York Giants host the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday at MetLife Stadium. Kickoff is set for 1:05 p.m. Eastern. And as always, I'm your host, Patricia Traina, joined by Brandon Olsen. We are with New York Giants on SI, and we're here to break down some of the key points of the upcoming game. And Brandon, I think we got to start with the obvious. Saquon Barkley is making his return to MetLife Stadium. Can you just talk about how that Eagles offense is different based on what Saquon has been able to bring over there?
Yeah, it's also interesting that he thinks he won't get booed. That one, clever. But yeah, the Eagles offense. It's interesting. He's kind of the lone back, which you expect when you pay a running back as much as Philly paid him. I feel like they haven't properly utilized him as a pass catcher yet to this point. I think throughout the years that he was with the Giants, he was incredibly dynamic. He's still playing with the dual threat quarterback, but this is also an offense that right now just feels bad for the Eagles. And I don't mean to be trash talky about that. It's just with the talent on that team, they're really underwhelming. And I don't think that they're using players like Saquon Barkley as effectively as they could. And while he's still getting all the money that he's getting, and he's been effective with his opportunities, I just think that he should be more of a focal point, and he's not right now.
The Giants have never had to defend Saquon Barkley in a game. Now they will. What does Shane Bowen's defense need to do in order to mitigate any threat that Saquon poses as a runner?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is going to come down to, first off, being lucky enough that the Eagles are unfortunately dealing with some injury concerns, specifically Jordan Mailata being ruled out at left tackle. So you kind of get that advantage. But also, this is a pretty zone-heavy run offense right now, which it benefits to have a guy like Dexter Lawrence in the middle. I mean, first off, against any team, it benefits to have a guy like Dexter Lawrence, but specifically against zone-heavy run games, or specifically inside zone-heavy run games, it's important to have a good nose tackle that can kind of dominate the middle, two-gap it, and Dexter Lawrence does that better than anyone on the planet right now. And so having him definitely helps. At that point, it's more about linebackers filling cutback lanes because plenty of experience with Saquon Barkley. He is going to bounce out if he can and try to create a big run there. Dexter Lawrence will close those gaps. And so I think a lot of it is going to come down to the off-ball linebackers, whoever's in at that time, to actually pursue and kind of cut off the edge before Saquon can get running in space.
Now, when you look at Jalen Hurts of the Eagles, he's been turnover prone this year, probably more so than in recent years. What is it about his game that other, decent defenses have been able to force so many turnovers, or has it just been luck?
I think a lot of it has come down to the offense right now for the Philadelphia Eagles under Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore is not a bad offensive coordinator. I don't believe Brian Johnson last year was a bad offensive coordinator. But since Shane Steichen left, they've kind of been boring. And I think a lot of that is Nick Sirianni kind of dictating what he wants his offense to do. And that's tough. And also, I will give Jalen Hurts the benefit of the doubt of saying, well, he's got his third offensive coordinator in 3 years, and quarterback's the most important position for that kind of continuity. And so a lot of it has come down to him trying to figure things out. He had a rough stretch last year as well. So he's had these cold stretches before. This year he seemed somewhat more aggressive as a passer, which I think leads to those turnovers of him trying to fit balls in tight windows that he probably shouldn't try to fit into. But I think a lot of it just comes down to everyone spent all offseason last year learning a brand new offense. And then this year they spent the whole offseason trying to learn a brand new offense with less reps in the preseason as well. They kind of took a little longer to get going. It's just tough, I think, for a lot of these guys to be able to step into this offense. And I think Jalen Hurts is one that is struggling from that as well.
Dallas Goedert, the tight end, is out. Jordan Mailata, the left tackle, was just put on IR. When you look at this Eagles offense, where are they most vulnerable?
I'm looking at that left tackle spot because it's going to be Fred Johnson, who, Florida legend, I will give him that credit. But he has not been good at all this year. And when I look at Brian Burns against almost any offensive tackle in the league, I go, okay, I'll give Brian Bird's advantage for a lot of these guys. When I look at him versus Fred Johnson, that seems like an unfair advantage there, but also Fred Johnson, 6'7", leaves you with a little bit of that. I'm fully leaning in on Azeez Ojulari, just wrecks taller offensive tackles. That's what he's done this year against the Browns. That's what he did last week as well against the Bengals with their taller offensive linemen. And a lot of it comes down to he bends the edge just so well, and he makes himself so small that it's tough for these taller offensive tackles to get hands on him. Fred Johnson, not exactly the most nimble offensive tackle, we'll say. And so to get in front of someone that's making themselves as low to the ground as Azeez Ojulari does, that's tough. So I'm looking at that left tackle spot. And I do think in the run game, they're really going to be missing Dallas Goedert. I don't think he's amazing, but Grant Calcaterra, not his strong suit to be getting mixy as a blocker right there.
All right, let's look now at the other sides of the ball. The Giants offensive line, they've lost Andrew Thomas for the rest of the year. Joshua Ezeudu is going to be the left tackle. They haven't announced it, but that's the direction it's going in. How does the complexion of that offensive line change? And do they have to change up the scheme any to compensate for the loss of Thomas?
It definitely hurts, I think. And I think a lot of that comes down to just the continuity of the offensive line. I mean, Andrew Thomas, very unfortunate that he's out, but during the preseason, he told us, he's like, hey, as long as there's some continuity to my right side at left guard, we're good. Like, I'll be good. Don't worry about that. And now last year, offensive line broke down. A lot of that was because of continuity with injuries. This year, that has happened at left tackle now. And Joshua Ezeudu, I don't think that anyone will compare him to Andrew Thomas fairly. That's not a thing you can really do with one of the best young offensive tackles in the NFL right now. But I do think that it kind of limits what you can do a little bit as an offense, at least until you figure out, okay, Joshua Ezeudu is ready to go at left tackle consistently. He's playing at a high level, partially because I think when you try to drop back and have these longer developing passing plays, offensive tackles specifically are going to be more likely to be left on an island. And so when you have Andrew Thomas out there, you can go, okay, I'm fine with my blind side. That's not the case anymore with Joshua Ezeudu. I'd also be interested to see if they shift their focus even more right heavy as far as running the ball to the right side of the offensive line, as opposed to going to the left side with Joshua Ezeudu.
Do you anticipate that maybe they'll give Josh Ezeudu a little bit more help on that left side with a tight end?
Yeah, I would absolutely expect a tight end to be on that side or a running back to be in the backfield on that side, and kind of had not so much a check and release with maybe, oh, is this linebacker blitzing, but are we doing good on that left side? All right, I'm going to bump this edge before I hop out for a route, which is becoming increasingly common in football now, as a running back leaks out, throws his shoulder kind of into the gut of the edge defender out there, and then leaks into the flat or runs his route wherever that may be. So I would probably expect to see a lot of that. Joshua Ezeudu is probably going to continue trying to force edge rushers around the outside to get some help there. But I do think that, yeah, you'll see either a tight end or a running back in on a lot of plays to help with pass protection.
Where do you see the biggest weakness for the Eagles defense that the Giants could potentially exploit?
I look at the secondary. I do not think that their secondary has been good this year, and a lot of that, I wrote about it last year with the Miami Dolphins defense. That first year under Vic Fangio, it's tough to be able to just work in and mesh properly right away. It's a complex defense. You see basically everywhere he goes, year one, the defense, specifically the pass defense, not great unless you have a consistent dominant pass rush. And so when you put your secondary out there, which right now they're very young in the secondary, Reed Blankenship, pretty young safety, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, way more experienced, but then you've got Cooper DeJean is a rookie. Quinion Mitchell is a rookie. You've got a lot of youth in that secondary right now. And I think being young and trying to learn this complex defense, not a great combination for success, but it's kind of trial by fire, it seems right now.
Last week, or actually the last 2 weeks, no Malik Neighbors. Daniel Jones survived it, the loss of Neighbors against Seattle, last week against Cincinnati. Not so much so with Malik Neighbors coming back. Now, we don't know if if he's going to have a full workload coming back after 2 weeks, or if it's going to be partial, but how does he change the overall offensive strategy against the Eagles team?
Yeah, I think he just makes you way more explosive downfield, especially for an Eagles defense that has been suspect there and had quite a few plays where you're almost there making a play with the secondary and then you just miss out. So Malik Neighbors, maybe he doesn't play as many snaps, but I would imagine that Brian Dable is thinking, well, if he's good to go, we're going to get him the ball as much as we can. And so even if that means, hey, he's only playing 30 snaps, but we're still getting him 9 targets on those snaps. I think that would be a big part of it. Great at moving the sticks. And I think that he gives Daniel Jones such a dynamic pass catcher with such a large catch radius that it really just helps his whole offense become more efficient. I'm interested to see what happens with Darius Slayton's usage, who kind of filled that role, obviously not to the level, but kind of filled that role while Malik Neighbors was gone. But I'm interested to see now if we see maybe they're both kind of like Malik Neighbors on the left side, Darius Slade on the right side, and they both got their designed routes and they're both getting kind of schemed open there. But I do think that it makes you way more dynamic as an offense.
And then finally, head coach Brian Dable said that Tyrone Tracy Jr. has earned more reps in the running game. Devin Singletary is coming back after a 2-week absence due to a groin strain. What are the benefits of those two having more of a balanced role in the offense? You know, that 1-2 punch. And do you think they can deploy that successfully, the run game that is, against the Eagles defense?
Absolutely. I think Tyrone Tracy is the more dynamic. He's got better pass catching ability out there. He's a great playmaker that, I mean, his whole question coming out of college was always, has he really grasped playing running back yet? Because he spent so much of his college career as a receiver. He seems like he's really coming into his own right now, but having the ability to just switch whichever running back situation and go true running back by committee. I don't think Eric Gray's played particularly poorly either. So having him as a running back 3 that, is going to see way less carries than the other 2, but still get his touches. I think that your running back room is now more dynamic than you felt it was at the beginning when it was kind of just Devin Singletary. And you get to keep these guys fresh for what's going to be a very long season with especially the schedule.
And then, I'm sorry, one more that I want to ask you. Last week, Daniel Jones kind of reverted a little bit to what we had seen earlier in the year with the inconsistencies and whatnot. He had been playing fairly well, up until that point. But are you seeing any kind of pattern or any kind of rhyme or reason behind, these inconsistencies of Daniel Jones's game?
Yeah, I think last week was just, it seemed like weird because just before the game, we spoke about how he's playing with way more confidence. And he seemed like he was still doing that as a rusher. But as a passer, he kind of looked a little hesitant on some plays, had some open receivers that he was a little late on and things like that just happened again. And I don't know if part of that was Lou Anarumo switching up the scheme of the Bengals or showing a different coverage pre-snap and post-snap and just causing that little delay. But I think that you've got to get back to get easy completions for Daniel Jones, use his legs. I loved the way that the offense was schemed up last week. It felt very college. You had running back motioning out, QB power, tight end screen, whatever it was. It felt very college, but it also felt effective if executed better. But the strategy there, I thought was great, and I think that you can continue to see that with the Malik Neighbors element added in, and hopefully that'll help Daniel Jones kind of get that confidence back because, again, the week prior played great without Malik Neighbors and he looked confident without Malik Neighbors. So hopefully having his number one receiver back will really help him gain that confidence or at least play with that confidence that the offense needs in order to run properly.
All right, he is Brandon Olsen on Patricia Traina. We are with New York Giants on SI. You can check out all our written work, including all our coverage leading up to the game, our coverage during the game, and our coverage after the game. For Brandon Olsen, Patricia Traina, thanks so much for tuning in.